You'll miss us? Deeply. That's what I like. Okay. So, good afternoon. It is, shall I say, super to see you all here today. It's even better because, you know, when I look back at 2019, we began our session with 39, and in 2020, we began our session with 40. And I'm announcing that in 2021, we will begin our session with a historic supermajority. And it will also be the biggest Senate majority conference in the history of New York State. We've defended seats downstate, and we made incredible gains. We have flipped seats upstate and in Western New York. And you have to consider that that's extraordinary because of the gerrymandered way the districts are drawn. I mean, I remember when I came in 2007, my district was a rectangle, and after the gerrymandering that happened after the last census in 2010, I always say my district looks like the smiling profile of an old man with a scraggly beard. It is that gerrymandered. And we know that on election night, many people wrote us off. They said it was a big red wave, and they were already predicting our shrinking majority. And as we know, the red wave turned out to be really more of a red mirage. And I want to really say, though, that I have to acknowledge and commend our incredible, incredible candidates, certainly our returning members who work so hard and have been reelected by their constituents, and our new candidates, who also are just incredible. It was an unprecedented election cycle with the pandemic, but because of hard work of our candidates and the staffers, and of course, the great staff at the DSCC and the entire political operation, it happened. You know, over the past 2 years, the Senate Democratic majority took historic actions to empower New York voters, enact meaningful gun safety legislation, help get weapons of war off the streets and out of our communities. We implemented a permanent property tax cap. We protected women's rights, health care options. We combated sexual harassment. We passed historic investments in our public education system, stood up for immigrants' rights to make New York a more welcoming place for new Americans. We implemented the most aggressive environmental protection and anti-climate change legislation in the nation. We invested in infrastructure, community revitalization efforts throughout our state, stood up for LGBTQ rights and protections. We advanced the most aggressive affordable housing and tenant protection legislation in state history. We protected New York's health and quality of life during this unprecedented pandemic. We reformed our criminal justice system and advanced police accountability measures, and so much more. The numbers prove that after the most productive legislation session in history, New Yorkers have not only chosen to return a Democratic majority, but again, they've chosen to return a supermajority. In addition to the major legislation we've passed, the Senate held a record number of hearings on important issues, including the impact of COVID-19 and on health care and transportation, on small businesses, on arts, culture, education. We've had hearings on housing discrimination and racist real estate policies. We've had hearings on how state funds public education and how we can ensure that all schools have the investment and resources they need to educate our children. We've had hearings on our state's mass transit systems and services that are provided to millions of New York commuters. utility companies' actions and failings to respond to major storms. We've had hearings on opioid and substance abuse, prevention, e-cigarettes, vaping, and New Yorkers having access to high-quality, affordable health care. As you can see, we've been a very active Senate majority over our first session, and clearly the voters want to keep us there so that we continue to do good work for New Yorkers. By sending a supermajority of the Senate Democrats back to Albany, New Yorkers have made it clear that they want government to keep working for them and standing up for New York values and for the hardworking men and women of this state. As a co-equal branch of government, we recognize the mandate we've been given by the voters, and we will assert ourselves accordingly as we work with our colleagues in government, Governor Cuomo and Assembly colleagues, to move New York State forward. We know that the challenges facing our state as we fight this pandemic and work to recover economically are daunting. As we continue to confront this crisis, we know that the burden must be shared fairly and that we must secure additional revenues, including help from our federal government, and that all this must be done without relying on our working and middle-class families or struggling small businesses. We're grateful for the trust and the confidence New York voters have showed in us by electing the supermajority, and will act accordingly as we lead New York State forward. We would not be standing in this position, of course, without the guidance of my great deputy, Senator Mike Gianaris, who chairs our DSCC. And I want to thank you, Senator Gianaris, for, getting it done. And I said, I've always put out that, I wanted a certain number, and, we're there. So now let me just turn it over to Senator Gianaris for a few comments. Senator.
Thank you, Leader Stewart-Cousins, for your leadership. You have an appropriate title. As we were walking down here, I called her the super leader, which I guess is a new thing that we don't get to call anyone in the Senate that often. But you have taken us to the promised land in a way nobody thought was possible, to sit with a supermajority, one that the Democratic Party has never had in this state, and one that very few have ever had, and the largest majority of any party ever, is really a testament to your ability to show the way and make sure that the people of this state are pleased with what we're doing and have verified our steps forward. Let me begin by tipping my hat to Rob Ort and Nick Langworthy for one of the greatest self-owns of all time a couple weeks ago. I want to, they said some things that turned out to be true, but not in the way that they had hoped. So I want to make sure I get it right. This is Senator Ort. You could almost feel the overconfidence from the other side, but it was a reminder that New Yorkers decide elections, not talking heads, not press people, and not even state senators. That was word for word Rob Ort a couple of weeks ago, and he was right about that, but not in the way that he had thought. Let's talk about some of the things he said that were wrong. They came out of the last election with 23 members on the Republican side, and he had predicted they would end up this cycle with between 27 and 29. And as we all now know, they'll be lucky to end up with 20, depending on the counts that are still ongoing. He also tried to characterize it as a repudiation of one-party rule. Well, I think then if that was true 2 weeks ago based on what he thought the results were, I guess we would have to say that what happened was an affirmation of one-party rule and an affirmation of the Senate majority and the way we have done our work. A message was sent by the voters. Let's be clear about that. Let's be clear about something else. The Republicans did not beat the Democrats on the messaging, as some have said. Obviously, they took their best shot. And I want to say about a specific issue something very clearly, because there's been a lot of chatter about it. Whether you're talking about the Republicans, right-wing billionaires, or PBAs across this state, every voter who voted in a state Senate election knew that bail was an issue. And they made their choice, and they returned not just the number of Democrats we had, but even more to the Senate. I want to say something else about that, because The opponents of bail reform took their best shot, and they failed miserably. There were 9 freshman members who were in competitive races. 7 have won their races. They're winners. 2 are still in an absentee ballot count. 6 of those 7 won by larger margins than they did in 2018. So if anyone tries to tell you that, in fact, we should have done better, no majority has ever done better in an election in this state's history. This was a mandate by the voters, a mandate for Leader Stewart-Cousins to continue taking us in the direction we're going, and a mandate to keep doing things for the people of this state that they want done, they expect done, and that they have been waiting for decades to get done. They got a taste of it in 2019 and 2020, and they affirmed our direction with the elections this year. And so, open up for questions for the leader, or if anyone's got specific questions about some of the counts, I'm happy to handle those.
You mentioned that you were going to assert yourself accordingly, and I guess does that mean that you foresee a time where you might be able to override a veto of the governor if it comes to a disagreement?
I mean, I think that, as I said, I've always wanted parity with my colleague in the Assembly. There was a supermajority there. We didn't have one, and so now we will have one. So we will have as much power as the Assembly, and as I've said, I think that we understand that New York and New Yorkers expect certain things from a progressive state, and we will continue with that. And I've seen our partners in government actually agreeing on many of the things that we do. So obviously the opportunity will be there, but I don't foresee that being the reason that we get up and come to work every day. I think it's a lot easier, frankly, when you are all rowing towards the same shore. We don't have ideological disagreements. Sometimes we disagree on how to do it, but pretty much we all understand what needs to be done.
Earlier today, the governor was doing a press conference and he said that the supermajority doesn't make a big difference. So wondering if you want to respond to that. And then also now that you guys do end up having a supermajority, what pieces of legislation will you advance? Is it stuff in the past, other things like legalization of marijuana, raising taxes on the wealthy? What are some of your priorities?
Well, again, I think that probably what he meant was what I just said, pretty much, is that we generally agree. So I don't see that this would be an issue, but it is certainly a potential because of our supermajority status. In terms of the different things right now, quite honestly, is to get out of this budget situation that we're in, to get people COVID-free to the extent that we can, to get this virus under control and to get the economic situation in our state under control. And I think that everybody understands that. And again, so it will be how to do it. And as I said, everything is on the table for us. But we also know, and I know that the governor says the same thing, that the reality is that we have a huge deficit, and we need a lot of answers, and most of those good answers need to come from our federal government. But like I said, everything is on the table.
Peter, that said, are we going to wait until January?
It's not necessarily that. We're waiting for the, as you said, we're not waiting. First of all, we are in constant conversation. And right now, again, there is talk of some package coming forward. We would obviously like to know that there's a package coming forward and what's contained in that package, and we will continue to have conversations. So it's not about, it's about like what we need to do, and as soon as we can figure out how much we need to do, we will do it.
Just to put a finer point on it, we've been playing this wait-and-see game since May, and I understand why. It sounds like you're content to keep doing that you don't necessarily see the need for some kind of a session this month if the federal government doesn't act like next week or something.
Well, I don't think it would be this month, but I have not taken off the table next month. No, I mean, as I said, I will not take that off the table at all. So I said, we are watching what's happening, and we will be responding or acting as it is appropriate. But I said, it certainly, I don't see it this month. No.
Has the governor called to congratulate you on your wins?
No, actually, but I'm sure he's happy about it.
So beyond the veto override, the other piece of this is that you have the ability to do whatever you want with redistricting process
Right.
in 2022. Should we expect Republicans to become like Republicans in the Assembly, where they're in a permanent minority and lines are drawn in a way that guarantees they're irrelevant?
Well, again, I hope that the thing that the voters voted for was a conference that, again, prioritized New Yorkers. And that was why we did early voting. That is why we have found ways to have hearings all over the state, because we actually believe in listening to New Yorkers. We're not picking our voters. As I said at the beginning, I started with a district that was a rectangle, and after the gerrymandering that happened under Republicans, I have a district that is the smiling profile of an old man with a scraggly beard. That is gerrymandering. We will do the right thing. I believe that we will be able to draw lines that, again, are contiguous and rational, and still be able to achieve a Democratic majority.
When it comes to state legislative races that are, still in the works when it comes to key ballot counts, what about those particular races have given you confidence that you will get them?
Well, we had they already declared victors in 41 seats, so it was just a matter of where the last were coming from. It appears that Senator Harkin is going to be number 42. Technology is wonderful. We get real-time updates. So as I was standing there, I noticed that the lead that Serino had is dipped to under 2,000 votes now. At the rate it's going, we're winning 76% of the absentees. There's over 18,000 of them still to count. So if not today, by tomorrow, Senator Harkin should be in the lead.
You had mentioned that bail reform was one of the hot-button issues coming into this election, and I don't know exactly what you mean by that. Do either or both of you see things that need to be adjusted with bail and discovery reform, and if so, what are those things?
I was referring to the campaigns where we know that millions of dollars were spent mischaracterizing the laws we've already passed. And fortunately, the voters are smart enough to see through that, and they had, everyone likes to talk about the fact that we were being attacked for it, but to no consequence, apparently. The people that won their elections won by larger margins than they won in 2018, which was seen as a historic blue wave year. And so we're going to continue to do the work, I think, that we have been doing and prioritize fairness in our criminal justice system.
So are there any actual valid criticisms that were made over the past year about the laws, in your opinion?
Well, I'm someone who had a hand in the original law being drafted as well. And we made some alterations this year, but I'll let the leader address that.
Again, I think that part of what we've done and what's made us successful is that we are able to take a look at what we've done. We have hearings even after early voting. We had early voting, we had hearings, we saw how it worked out, and so on and so forth. We will always do that with whatever piece of legislation we do, especially if it's an ongoing issue. So it's always about trying to get to the right answer. And the right answer with bail, as we always said, was about not criminalizing poverty. We want to criminalize criminals, but not criminalize poverty. And that has always been, and again, what Senator Gianaris was saying is that it was a target and mischaracterized in terrible ways, but people were able to see through that.
Also, this is tangentially related, but about discovery reform. It seemed in real time in September like political theater when Rob Orr brought this up, but are you too familiar with this leaked interrogation video that's on YouTube from Albany, where a person named 6 people, the person's identified, and he blamed it on discovery reform, but there seems to be debate. Like John McDonald from the Assembly says, a tweak is needed as opposed to a full-blown overhaul of the law. You guys have any idea what's going on?
Well, I haven't seen that video. We'll be happy to look into it. But again, we're trying to do what people want us to do. People want equal justice. They want to have speedy trials. They want to have information about why they're convicted. And so, you know, these were reforms that we knew were important, and obviously the majority of New Yorkers felt that way as well.
So regarding the 2021 session, I assume it's not going to be a normal session where everybody's here running around. Is it going to be mostly virtual? And will the Capitol ever be open in some limited form to the public?
Well, I think we're all hoping that we will be able to get out of this situation, and said I'm just happy that we were nimble. We, unlike the U.S. Senate, for example, went virtual right away. As soon as we realized that we had to do our business, we are now capable of doing it, and we will do what we have to do to keep people safe, because first of all, we want to model proper behavior, and secondly, we want to be able to live and be healthy enough to be able to do the work. So I hope that things will change, but we are all in the same situation right now.
If federal aid does not arrive, are you guys still looking at possible revenue?
We would have to. We would have to. I mean, listen, we would have to anyway, but the extent would be really devastating, I think.
So would that include marijuana legalization, expansion of casinos, things like that? Are those things on the table?
Always. They've always been. I mean, with our majority in terms of the mobile gaming, et cetera, we've always been willing to have that conversation, as well as marijuana. It's, as they always say, it's not so much a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and it's a matter of how. And the conversation has always been, what happens to the revenues? How do we include disparately impacted communities in the economy of this industry? And how do we make sure that resources to disparately impacted communities are gotten in those communities? So, as well as education, obviously. I mean, I think there's an important education piece as it relates to drug usage in general. So those are the things that, and I think even New Jersey obviously had a hard time trying to figure that out, and then they punted, and then people said go do it, and so now it's back in their court. But those are kinds of the issues. Those are the issues that we are really.
Has New Jersey increased the momentum, do you feel, for marijuana?
I would, you know, as I said, I think that it certainly is a big piece of it, of course.
Senator, it's kind of two parts here. You know, do you take away anything from these elections in terms of any kind of message of things that you might be doing differently going forward? You know, you said you took this as a mandate from thing, but just clearly, if you have anything you want to do different. And then you're going to be adding members from areas that have not traditionally been part of your conference. So how do you think that will change your approach going forward this year?
I think we've learned that voters, given the opportunity to vote, which I'm very proud that we did, we expanded the voting opportunities when we started our session, our historic session. It began with expanding voting opportunities and really giving people the understanding that there is power in their exercise of their franchise. So I think the fact that folks have turned out in unprecedented numbers is important. So that's an important lesson. The adding people, you know, people were wondering how we were going to manage with our majority and how we were going to manage with the new majorities from upstate and Long Island. And we do it the way we do it. We do it so that everybody, frankly, is at the table. I think the secret of our sauce is making sure that the voices are heard, and our conference will only be enhanced by the additional voices and regions that will be represented in it. So I'm very excited about it.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you all. Good to see you. Stay well. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.